Right then, our final speaker of today is Monica Lassi, who is going to present to us the work of Thread 5, which is understanding how we all work together. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you. Hi. So I'm going to begin by saying sorry for the wall of text, and there's going to be more of those. And I just figured when hearing Johan's talk that I should really have used your algorithms to create some keywords for the presentation. Well, here we are. So Thread 5, as Melvin has said, is kind of a meta thread, or as astronomers say, a super thread, which sounds really super, so we'll use that term. Really adding a reflexive layer and a learning layer to the other 4 threads. So that's the idea of the theme. So why do that? Well, we had the idea of looking at these quite different type of projects within the other 4 threads. So adding this reflexive layer kind of created or can create knowledge on how we communicate, how we get to learn about each other's research, each other's data and methods, and then, as I will talk a bit more about, looking at the data and the needs from my own and Catherine's perspective, the thread leaders of this. I will go into that a bit later. And what are the best practices of data management that we see among our participants? So what do we think about? We think a lot about, and we also talk actually a lot. How do we describe our research and our data so that other people can understand it from different disciplines? And what do we need to know about each other's research and data in order to collaborate well? Here I have the term facilitating cross-disciplinary collaboration, but really I would say it's more about interdisciplinary collaboration, where we really try to work closely together, creating something new. Cross-disciplinary, we often say that people come in from different fields and maybe don't create something new, a new whole, so to speak, but rather you contribute with your expertise and you move in and out of projects and research, more not being that affected perhaps in your own research experiences. That's really a general kind of description of the differences. So in order to really do this kind of interdisciplinary work, we need to understand each other. What do we mean when we say model, as Ross and Philip asked in one of the sessions we've had? What does method mean and what does data mean, for example? We also think about how to ensure that data is fair. This is a very kind of both a buzzword, but also something pervasive within the open data discourse now. So how do you make data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable? And not only data, but also the metadata, the descriptions of our data sets. How do we make sure that's also reusable and interoperable and accessible and findable? So that's kind of a meta level to fair as well, you could say. We also think about and talk about the power dynamics in access to data. Who gets access? Who doesn't get access? Does it cost anything, and for whom? Nicole talked about long-term preservation and how there's a problem both at the university level but also at the national level, where we don't really have the facilities to ensure long-term preservation. We have so much great research in Sweden that we don't really know how to preserve long-term. So the thread leaders are Catherine Harrison, who is at the Department of Gender Studies, and myself. I'm based at the Department of Scholarly Communication at the University Library. But I also work at the central level at the university with open science and open data issues. And I'm also an application expert at Lundmark, focusing on metadata, ontologies, and provenance of data. So I think a lot about data, as you see. So the second wall of text. So Catherine and I, we work at different departments and have different approaches to our research, but it all kind of mixes together within an interdisciplinary framework. And I'm going to go a lot meta here, because this, you could say we have a list of some fields and disciplines and approaches, just to name a few and give you an idea of where is this research happening. So we have science and technology studies, where Catherine positions herself very clearly. That's her area. And then we have CSCW, computer-supported cooperative work, where I would position myself more related to a socio-technical perspective or approach to research. And then we have critical data studies, which is a field where I shall say that all of these fields have researchers from quite many different disciplines. So they are, in fact, also very interdisciplinary. And we have gender studies with power relations, for example, of data and research. And the socio-technical approach, where we try to look at what's happening with in the intersection of people and organizations and technology. How do they and we affect each other? So if we have, one example is our CRIS system here, LuCRIS, where you input photos. I just heard Melvin talk about that, that you should add a photo of yourself. That's kind of the baseline for information. But then, of course, you should add your papers and other types of activities that you want to be shown at the university portal for research. So what happens to researchers when we implement the LuCRIS system at the university? We need new ways of working. We need support. We need to learn this new tool that's also very pervasive of the university now. So everyone from the researcher on an individual level to support staff kind of needs to learn this system and continuously adapt and adopt to it. And the system hopefully adapts or adopts our practices as well. And depending on if the system, in this case, proprietary software, if we as customers are heard, they do change the software. So that's kind of things that's going on in, for example, the socio-technical approach to research on these things. And that's also connected, of course, to human-computer interaction. How do we interact with technology? And not only the interface, but also the functionality and workflows, etc. Social informatics is another one. And the discipline where I have my PhD is library and information science, which is really also interdisciplinary. So I've given some examples of the types of areas that we look at in these different types of fields, but I will just say something about the type of foci one can have here. So what are data or is data, and when? That's something that is really, you could focus a lot on only that for your entire career, because it's so different between disciplines. And when in the researchers work with the data, that you kind of define, okay, this is raw data. Then I do some analysis on it, and now it's something different. So those kind of questions. We also have infrastructure development and use, and that's also, of course, related to policy issues. So how does one decide to fund this huge infrastructure, ESS, in Lund, while the data management unit is in Denmark? So what kind of decisions are made to create such a situation? That can also be, of course, studied within the policy aspects of science and data and infrastructure. We can also look at the workflows of users communicating with data and infrastructures, and the workflows of data themselves within the data life cycle. I will also say something about the incentives and disincentives of sharing and reusing data. This is something I'm very interested in myself, and not only as a researcher, but when I talk to researchers here at Lund University, it's really evident that sharing, there needs to be more incentives to share. There aren't that many disciplines that actually have that practice already to, sure, have my data. I just collected them yesterday and anyone can use them. So looking at the incentives for creating such a practice in different disciplines, if it's necessary. Going back to the policy aspects, who want this? Who want us to share our data? And why? And do they in some way incentivize sharing? And that's, of course, funders is one answer to this. They want their money to create something to be used further by others. So it's kind of an investment for them to fund a project, and they want the most out of that. So a bit of the how questions then. What we did during autumn was to get the theme thinking about and talking about interdisciplinary research and about data in this interdisciplinary context that we're in. And as Melvin said, we have members from almost all faculties in the data theme. And we have guests coming in now and then. And so it's really an area where we need to talk about, so what is data exactly? And how can you talk about your data so that someone from another discipline understands it? So we had some guest presentations, and we have one coming up next Wednesday. Michael Witt will present the repository that you have at the Purdue University. I saw that there are 4 places still open, so if you're very quick, email me and I'll set you up so you can come. But really, there aren't that many places left for that one. So we also had some reading group seminars where we, Catherine and I had selected texts about research and data that we discussed. These themes kind of went throughout these different types of activities. So we also had discussion seminars, bringing your own data, showing this is my type of data, this is what I work with. And so the themes were basically, what are data? And we had an article called Raw Data is an Oxymoron. And that was really difficult because the idea in that article is data are never raw, because it's it's always cooked by someone. Someone has, if you take, for example, an instrument measuring temperature, someone has calibrated that and decided this is what we're going to measure. This is the, we're going to measure in Celsius or whatever. So there is always this kind of community behind and a social aspect to all data, even though we talk about it as raw. So that was a really interesting seminar. And we talk about fair data then, because it's really important also to relate to when we write applications and talk to the stakeholders who really think this is important. Trust and reliability in academia. How do we trust data that someone else has created? How do we know if we can really use it and if we use it correctly? Another aspect of that is, so if I share my data, what if someone uses this in a way that's erroneous? I can't take that chance, so I won't do it. So it's that trust issue is very interesting. We also, I'm skipping some of this, but visualization of data, we had a guest, Melvin listed the guests. Anne Beaulieu has done a lot of work. She was here in October to talk about visualization in humanities and social science. We also had Matthew Beats in October here, and he talked about data ethics. So in big data, what people think a lot of the time about it being quite anonymous, but still, if we use our GPS, what does that kind of data tracking us, how can that be used? And we're quite, it's easy to just click accept to any kind of agreements online, and then companies collect a lot of data about us, and they do research on us, of course, to tweak their stuff, but also can sell it to others to do research on. So that was also very interesting. I won't mention more about that, but rather what's going on this spring. So we already had a public panel in collaboration with Big Science and Society Network regarding data management and infrastructure. In this case, Max4 and ESS were on the panel, for example. And the next event I just told you about, that's Michael. And then on April 18th, we have a seminar on homemade versus commercial. So this is one of the sessions. Bring your own software. Show us what you're doing. And we will connect it to the research data lifecycle. So do you use this when you collect the data, or when you do some preliminary analysis or clean the data, or when in the cycle do you use this? How does it work? And are there gaps? Would you like some kind of smoother workflow, but then you have to bring it into some other software, etc., etc. So that's what we're going to look at that seminar. And then I won't give you the schedule for our final event because it's not done yet, but save the date, 3rd of May. It's in this room, so you know where and when, and trust me, it's going to be great. We have, I'll tell you that we have both Anne Beaulieu and Christine Borgman, who is one of the major researchers on data and scientific collaboration, are coming, so it's going to be great. We also have a small study being done in our thread, because we want to find out what are the experiences from the thread leaders of the 4 threads, or actually the 5 threads, regarding working together, because all of the projects are interdisciplinary in their nature. So how have people had to start talking to each other and understand each other and communicate and get to learn each other's research to kind of get to the actual working together. We do semi-structured interviews, and Catherine and I will interview the 4 threads, and then we have Matthew Beats interviewing us, thread 5, so we get a meta layer there. And then we will also interview the co-coordinators, but I won't interview myself, so I will be part of the study participants at that time, and Catherine interviewing us. So all of this we see as creating some understanding around our processes, and hopefully, I will show last slide here, we can get some new knowledge out of it. So we expect this to be a journal article sometime. So coming back to the why, to wrap things up, why are we doing this? Why is this meta thread really important? You have probably seen there are a lot of calls for applications for projects that are interdisciplinary. It's really a buzzword. It's everywhere. At the university, at faculties, nationally, internationally, it's everywhere. So we hope to contribute to some understanding of what is needed to work truly interdisciplinary, where you don't just come in and say, well, use that method and I'll do a script here and go ahead and do your thing. I'll be on the authors list, but yeah. And what is needed to make it meaningful and easy, if that's possible, and fun. I think most of the data participants have had fun so far, and that's an important aspect of it, I think. So, expectations. What are people's expectations of going into something like this? Is it just because there was this call, or can we make it more really beneficial for people on a more deep level? What are the challenges? And any ideas that come from our study then on how to counteract these challenges? What are the views and approaches to working with data that we have seen so far? And another issue related to the policy aspects are choosing publishing venues. Everyone needs to think, how does this affect my career? And of course, publishing in the right arenas is, the primary kind of incentive. But when you work truly interdisciplinary, some of the natural arenas that you would publish might not accept your paper because it's too broad or it's not focused enough. So that's another thing to really bring back also to the universities in Sweden to incentivize these types of research projects. And that's my final slide. So any questions, I'd be happy to discuss with you.
Thank you. Indeed. Any questions, comments, or thoughts from the audience? Please.
Thanks for your talk, Monica. All of the different threads in the data theme are clearly impactful, but one thing that I see in this last thread, due to the interdisciplinary nature of it, I think, is that it could tie potentially to the university, to Lund. So do you see any direct impacts or outcomes from your thread that might affect the research enterprise here at the university, or policies or services or support for research data?
Great question, yeah. So I mentioned that I work on the central level a bit with open science and open data, and that's really all we do is feeding into that work as well. I have also been involved in drafting a policy for research data management, which is also has been presented now to the university management. So we discussed this at one of our seminars at the data theme. It's really important because yeah, getting the researchers' thoughts and ideas and farhågor is a good Swedish word. What could that be in English? Worries, something like that, yeah. Really, so it really ties a lot into that, I would say, yeah.
Please, just wait for the microphone, please. It'll come.
With all this attention has been lately on GDPR in society and stuff, is that something that has made its way into your thread and the way you're working with the data?
Yes, to our thread, in the way that we, in our consent form for the interviews, we have stated that the participants will not be anonymized because it's so easy to figure out who people are anyway. And we also say that the interviews will be archived. So it's kind of, that's the level of it here. And I don't think we've actually talked that much about GDPR at the theme, but it's alive. That discussion is alive in many different arenas at the university.
Okay. If there are no further comments, thoughts or questions, then let's thank Monica one more last time, please.